The emergency session of the Galactic Convergence Council convened in the ancient chamber orbiting the dead star, Chronos 7. Representatives from all 7 member species materialized through various forms of faster-than-light travel, their forms casting strange shadows in the chamber's artificial light. But today, for the first time in 50,000 years, an 8th representative sat at the council table, Admiral Jake Morrison, recently promoted from his position as colony captain, represented humanity in the emergency session. His simple human appearance contrasted sharply with the exotic forms of the other council members, but his presence carried a weight that surprised even the ancient beings around him. Zektar of the Zephyrians activated the chamber's central display, and the image that appeared made several council members recoil in recognition. The sensor data showed a dark mass moving through space between galaxies, consuming entire star systems as it traveled. The mass was growing larger with each system it devoured. "The Devourers have awakened," Zektar announced, his crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated deep fear. Long-range sensors detected their approach 12 days ago. Current trajectory analysis indicates they will reach our sector in approximately 8 standard months. Admiral Morrison studied the display with the tactical eye of someone who had spent his life solving impossible problems. The entity on the screen was unlike anything in human military databases, but the basic principles of threat assessment still applied. "How large is this force we're facing?" Unit Prime 9 of the Axiom processed the question with mechanical precision. Current mass estimates suggest approximately 100,000 individual entities, each comparable in size to a council dreadnought. However, historical data indicates that devourer capabilities exceed our understanding of conventional physics. Thren vocal of the aquatic Threnodi rippled their tentacles in a gesture that indicated ancient memory. "The Devourers destroyed my species' original homeworld 43 million years ago. They consume matter, energy, and even space-time itself. No council species has ever successfully defeated them in direct combat." The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a funeral shroud. Jake looked around the table at beings who represented civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had existed, and he saw something that surprised him: resignation. "What has been your strategy in previous encounters?" Jake asked. Neth Whisper of the gaseous Nathali responded with patterns of light that conveyed deep sadness. "Evacuation, retreat, survival. When the Devourers approach a sector, we abandon it completely. Entire civilizations relocate to safer regions of space. It is the only way any species has survived previous awakening cycles." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "How many inhabited systems are in the projected path of this Devourer swarm?" 847 systems, Unit Prime 9 replied. "Total population approximately 400 billion sentient beings across all council species. Standard evacuation protocols would require abandoning the entire outer rim of our territory." The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the crisis became clear. 400 billion lives at stake, and the accumulated wisdom of 7 ancient civilizations offered only one solution: run away and hope the Devourers went back to sleep before consuming the entire galaxy. Jake stood up from his seat, and something in his posture made the other council members focus their attention on him. "Has anyone considered fighting back?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Several council members made sounds that might have been laughter in their respective species, but there was no humor in it. "Admiral Morrison," Zektar said gently, "I understand that your species has not yet encountered the Devourers, but please understand that these entities have been a galactic threat for millions of years. Every major civilization has tried to fight them at some point. The Karath threw their entire military fleet against a single Devourer entity 50,000 years ago. The battle lasted 3 minutes. What happened to the Korath fleet?" Jake asked. "It was consumed completely. Ships, crews, weapons, everything. The Devourer entity actually grew larger after the battle." Jake nodded as if this information was useful rather than terrifying. "So the Devourers can absorb and adapt to conventional military technology. That's important tactical intelligence." The other council members exchanged looks of concern. The human was treating this like a problem to be solved rather than a disaster to be escaped. Colonel Lucy Grant materialized in the chamber through humanity's newly developed quantum communication system. As Jake's chief military strategist, she had been analyzing council historical data about Devourer encounters for the past week. Her findings had convinced Jake to request this emergency session. "Members of the council," Lucy began, "I've completed my analysis of previous Devourer conflicts, and I believe we have been approaching this threat incorrectly." She activated a holographic display that showed tactical analyses of historical battles. Every previous engagement followed the same pattern. Council forces used superior technology and logical military doctrine to engage the Devourers in conventional space combat. The results were uniformly disastrous. "Because the Devourers are superior to any Council military force," Thren Vocal observed. "No," Lucy replied firmly. "Because Council species think too logically. Your military tactics are based on mathematical optimization and technological superiority. The Devourers have had millions of years to adapt to logical approaches. What they haven't faced is chaos." Unit Prime 9 processed this statement with visible confusion. "Chaos is inefficient. Random tactics reduce combat effectiveness by measurable percentages." "Against logical opponents, yes," Lucy agreed. "But the Devourers aren't logical. They're adaptive. They learn from every encounter and develop countermeasures to any strategy they face. The only way to fight an adaptive enemy is with unpredictability." Jake stepped forward to support his strategist's argument. "Humans excel at three things that other species seem to lack: improvisation, irrational tactical decisions, and sacrificial cooperation. We've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting enemies that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than we were. We learned to win by doing things that made no logical sense." The council members listened with growing interest as Jake outlined humanity's proposal. Instead of evacuating the threatened systems, they would make a stand at the sector's edge. Council technology and resources would be coordinated using human tactical doctrine based on unpredictability and adaptive response. "The key," Lucy explained, "is accepting that we will take casualties. Council military doctrine prioritizes preservation of resources and personnel. Human military doctrine prioritizes mission accomplishment. We're willing to sacrifice individual units to achieve strategic objectives." Zektar's crystalline form shifted to colors indicating deep thought. "You are proposing that Council forces accept command from a species that has existed in space for less than 3 years. "We're proposing that Council forces work with us as partners," Jake corrected. "Each species contributes what they do best. The Zephyrians provide computational power for tactical analysis. The Korath supply heavy weapons platforms. The Lixari manipulate energy fields for strategic advantages. Humans provide the unpredictability and coordination that turns those advantages into victory." The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours. Council members raised logical objections to the human proposal, pointing out the statistical probability of failure and the massive casualties that would result from direct confrontation with the Devourers. But as the discussion continued, something unexpected happened. One by one, the Council species began to realize that their logical approach to the Devourer threat had never actually worked. For 50,000 years, they had been running from an enemy that kept growing stronger and more aggressive with each awakening cycle. The decision came when Neth Whisper of the Nathali made a statement that surprised everyone in the chamber. "Perhaps it is time to try something illogical." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, the Council would make a stand against the Devourers. 7 ancient civilizations would place their fate in the hands of a species they had dismissed as primitive and fragile just 3 years earlier. As the Council session ended and representatives began preparing for what might be the final battle in galactic history, Jake looked out at the dead star around which they orbited. Soon they would discover whether human adaptability and sacrifice could succeed where millions of years of logical military doctrine had failed. The Devourers were coming, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they refused to give up. 2 years had passed since the humans landed on New Phoenix, and Council Representative Zektar was preparing for what should have been a simple resource survey. According to their calculations, the primitive carbon-based creatures should have been extinct for at least 6 months. The southern continent's harsh environment had never supported long-term habitation by any species, which made it perfect for concealing the trilithium deposits until the Council could begin mining operations. Zektar's crystalline form shifted colors as he reviewed the sensor data from the planet's surface. Something was wrong with their readings. Instead of the expected silence from a dead colony, their instruments detected extensive energy signatures across the entire southern continent. More puzzling still, the energy patterns suggested organized, industrial activity on a scale that should have been impossible for the humans to achieve. The scout ship descended through New Phoenix's atmosphere with Zektar and representatives from 3 other council species aboard. Thren Vocal of the aquatic Threnody floated in a specialized life support tank, their tentacles writhing with curiosity. Unit Prime 9 of the mechanical axiom processed data streams with mathematical precision. Neth Whisper of the gaseous Nathali drifted through the ship's corridors like a cloud of intelligent mist. The energy readings are definitely artificial, Unit Prime 9 announced in its precise mechanical voice. However, the technology signatures do not match any known council systems. The humans appear to have developed engineering solutions that our databases cannot classify. As their ship approached the coordinates of the original human landing site, Zektar expected to see ruins and wreckage scattered across the desert floor. Instead, the landscape below showed clear signs of massive engineering projects. Geometric patterns covered dozens of square kilometers, and structures that resembled solar collectors tracked the movement of the system's orange star with mechanical precision. The biggest surprise came when their ship received a communication signal from the surface. The transmission was strong, clear, and definitely human in origin. A male voice speaking in the crude but functional language of Earth requested permission for the council ship to land at specific coordinates. "This is Engineer Pete Sullivan of New Phoenix Colony. We've been expecting your visit and have prepared landing facilities for your convenience. Please follow the guidance beacons to Pad 7. Zektar's crystalline form darkened with confusion. Landing facilities? Guidance beacons? These terms suggested infrastructure that should have been far beyond human capabilities, especially after surviving for 2 years in the planet's hostile environment. The landing pad turned out to be a smooth platform, carved directly from the desert rock and equipped with energy dampening fields that safely guided their ship to the surface. As the council representatives emerged from their vessel, they found themselves surrounded by technology that looked simultaneously primitive and advanced. Human-built structures rose from the desert floor, but they were unlike anything in council architectural databases. The buildings seemed to grow organically from the landscape itself, as if the humans had learned to work with the planet's natural forces instead of imposing their will upon them. Solar collectors that tracked the sun were integrated, with systems that appeared to harness the energy from the constant sandstorms. Pete Sullivan approached the landing party with a confidence that surprised Zektar. The human wore clothing adapted to the local environment and moved with the easy familiarity of someone who had mastered survival in conditions that should have killed him long ago. Behind him came other humans, including several whose appearance suggested they had been born on this planet. "Welcome to New Phoenix," Pete said as he gestured toward the structures around them. "We're honored to host the first official council delegation to our colony. Captain Morrison and Dr. Parker are waiting to give you a tour of our facilities." The tour that followed challenged everything the council representatives thought they knew about carbon-based life forms. The humans had not simply survived in the hostile environment. They had transformed it into something that supported not just life, but civilization. Their underground city stretched for hundreds of kilometers through natural cave systems that had been expanded and reinforced with engineering techniques that impressed even Unit Prime 9, Dr. Lisa Parker led them through research laboratories, where humans studied the local ecosystem with scientific methods that rivaled council standards. The most remarkable discovery was that the humans had learned to work with the planet's toxic biology instead of fighting against it. They had developed hybrid ecosystems that combined earth plants with local organisms to create food sources that were both nutritious and sustainable. The key insight, Dr. Parker explained as they walked through underground gardens that bloomed with impossible colors, was realizing that the local toxins weren't trying to kill us specifically. They were part of a planetary immune system that responded to any foreign biological intrusion. Once we learned to integrate our biology with the local systems, we stopped being seen as invaders. Agricultural specialist Ben Harper showed them hydroponic facilities that produced more food per square meter than anything in council agricultural databases. The secret was a complex symbiosis between human technology, earth crops, and local microorganisms that created growing conditions perfectly adapted to New Phoenix's unique environment. But the real revelation came when Dr. Amy Foster presented her medical research to the council delegation. The humans were not just surviving on New Phoenix, they were evolving. Children born on the planet showed enhanced physical capabilities, improved disease resistance, and cognitive abilities that exceeded baseline human norms. We've discovered that human biology is far more adaptable than anyone imagined. Dr. Foster explained as she displayed genetic analysis data that made Thren Vocal's tentacles quiver with excitement. Under extreme environmental pressure, our species can adapt within a single generation. The children born here are essentially a new subspecies optimized for this planet's conditions. Unit Prime 9 processed this information with growing amazement. The adaptation rate you describe exceeds our models for biological evolution by several orders of magnitude. How is such rapid change possible? Dr. Foster smiled as she answered. Stress. What the Council sees as human weakness, our short lifespans and emotional volatility, actually drives accelerated adaptation. We don't have the luxury of evolving slowly over millions of years like other species. When faced with extinction, we change or we die. The most impressive facility was the engineering complex where Maya Rodriguez and her team had developed technology that combined human innovation with principles learned from studying the planet's natural systems. Their machines could harness energy from sandstorms, earthquakes, and electrical discharges that would destroy conventional Council equipment. The secret is flexibility, Maya explained as she demonstrated a power generator that bent and twisted with seismic activity while continuing to produce electricity. Council technology is built to resist environmental forces. Our technology is built to work with them. When a sandstorm hits, our collectors don't try to withstand the wind. They ride it. The tour concluded in the colony's central hub, a vast underground chamber where thousands of humans went about their daily lives in a community that seemed to thrive despite the hostile world above. Children played in areas that would have been considered industrial zones by Council standards. Adults worked together on projects that required the kind of coordination that other species achieved only through hive minds or artificial intelligence networks. Captain Jake Morrison met with the Council delegation in a conference room carved from living rock and lit by bioluminescent organisms that the humans had domesticated from the local ecosystem. His presentation to the Council representatives was simple, but devastating in its implications. You gave us this territory because you expected us to die, Jake said calmly. You thought our short lives and weak bodies made us unsuitable for challenging environments. What you didn't understand is that those same qualities make us incredibly good at adapting to challenges that would destroy other species. Zektar's crystalline form flickered through several color changes as he processed what he had seen. Your species has accomplished in 2 years what Council projections suggested would require centuries of development. How do you explain this acceleration? Jake smiled as he answered. Because we had to. When survival is at stake, humans don't just work harder, we think differently. We take risks that logical species would never consider. We try solutions that mathematical analysis says should fail. Most importantly, we support each other in ways that multiply our individual capabilities. The Council delegation returned to their ship that evening, with data that would reshape their understanding of biological life in the galaxy. The humans were not the primitive, fragile creatures they had assumed. They were something far more dangerous, a species that became stronger when challenged and more innovative when threatened with extinction. As their ship departed New Phoenix's atmosphere, Zektar transmitted a priority message to the full Council assembly. The message was brief but urgent. The humans must be granted full Council membership immediately. 6 months after landing on New Phoenix, Jake Morrison stood in what used to be the main square of their colony and watched another sandstorm tear through their settlement. The wind howled like a living thing and carried rocks the size of basketballs at speeds that could kill a person instantly. This was the 3rd major storm this week, and it would not be the last. The original plan had been to build a surface colony with solar panels and atmospheric processors like the ones that worked so well on Mars. That plan died in the 1st month when they learned that New Phoenix had weather patterns unlike anything in Earth's database. Sandstorms could last for weeks and generate lightning powerful enough to melt metal. The temperature could drop 60 degrees in an hour when the storms moved in. Ryan Clark emerged from one of the underground shelters they had dug beneath the original landing site. His face was covered with dust and his clothes were torn from working in the cramped tunnels they now called home. As colony administrator, Ryan had the impossible job of keeping 8,000 people alive in conditions that seemed designed to kill them. We lost another section of the eastern tunnel, Ryan reported to Jake. The ground shifted during the night and crushed about 50 meters of corridor. No one was hurt, but we're running out of safe places to expand. Jake nodded grimly. Every day brought new problems that their training on Earth had never prepared them for. The planet's geology was unstable in ways that made no sense. Solid rock could turn into quicksand without warning. Underground rivers changed course randomly and flooded tunnels they thought were safe. And always there were the storms that made surface work nearly impossible. Dr. Lisa Parker had set up her laboratory in the deepest part of their underground complex. She spent her days analyzing samples of everything they encountered, trying to understand why this planet seemed determined to kill them. Her latest findings were not encouraging. The local plant life is toxic to human biology, Lisa explained to the colony leadership team. Not just poisonous, but actively toxic. The plants seem to produce compounds specifically designed to break down carbon-based cellular structures. It's like they evolved to fight against life forms like us. Engineer Maya Rodriguez had been working non-stop to design new systems that could function in the harsh environment. Her workshop was a maze of salvaged ship parts and improvised tools. Maya had always been good at making something from nothing, but New Phoenix was testing even her abilities. The atmospheric processors keep breaking down, Maya said as she wiped grease from her hands. The dust gets into everything and the electrical storms fry our circuits faster than I can replace them. We need to completely rethink our approach to technology here. The worst part was the wildlife. Security Chief Nick Williams had trained for hostile environments, but nothing had prepared him for the creatures that lived in the deserts of New Phoenix. The pack hunters looked like a cross between wolves and armored vehicles. Their hide was thick enough to stop bullets, and they hunted in coordinated groups that showed disturbing intelligence. We lost 2 more scouts yesterday, Nick reported during their daily briefing. The creatures set up an ambush near the water collection site. They're learning our patrol patterns and adapting their tactics. It's like fighting an enemy that gets smarter every time we encounter them. But the real disaster came during week 23, when the seismic monitoring system that Maya had built detected something terrifying. A massive earthquake was building deep beneath the colony. Not the small tremors they had learned to live with, but something that could destroy everything they had built. The earthquake hit at dawn on a Tuesday. The ground shook so violently that people were thrown against the tunnel walls. Support beams that Maya had reinforced with steel from the ship's hull cracked and bent like tree branches. Sections of the underground complex collapsed completely and trapped dozens of people in the rubble. When the shaking finally stopped, Jake emerged from the command center to find their world transformed. Half of their living spaces were gone. The main water purification plant was buried under tons of rock. Worse, the hospital section had been completely destroyed and they had lost medical equipment they could never replace. 200 people died in the earthquake. As Jake stood in the emergency shelter that night and listened to families crying for their lost loved ones, he wondered if the council had been right. Maybe humans really were too fragile to survive in places like this. Maybe they should have stayed on Earth where they belonged. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of giving up, the colonists began to adapt in ways that surprised even Jake. The families who had lost their homes moved in with neighbors without being asked. People who had never worked together before formed teams to dig through the rubble and rescue survivors. Dr. Amy Foster, their chief medical officer, set up a field hospital in a natural cave and worked for 3 days straight to save the injured. Maya Rodriguez made the first breakthrough when she realized they were thinking about their problems all wrong. Instead of trying to build Earth-style technology that could survive New Phoenix, they needed to build New Phoenix-style technology that worked with the planet instead of against it. Look at how the local creatures survive, Maya explained to Jake as she showed him her new designs. They don't fight the sandstorms, they hide from them. They don't resist the earthquakes, they move with them. We need to stop trying to be stronger than this planet and start being smarter than it. Maya began designing flexible tunnel systems that could bend without breaking during earthquakes. She created air filtration systems based on how the local plants processed the toxic atmosphere. Most importantly, she figured out how to harness the planet's constant electrical storms to power their equipment. Agricultural specialist Ben Harper made his own discoveries about survival on New Phoenix. The local soil was poisonous to earth plants, But Ben found that human waste products could neutralize the toxins. By mixing their sewage with the alien soil, he created growing medium that could support Earth crops. His hydroponic gardens began producing food in underground chambers lit by captured lightning. Even more surprising was what Dr. Amy Foster learned about human biology under extreme stress. The constant danger and harsh conditions were changing the colonists in measurable ways. Their lung capacity was increasing to handle the thin atmosphere. Their immune systems were adapting to filter out local toxins. Children born on New Phoenix showed enhanced reflexes and improved night vision. "We're evolving," Amy explained to Jake during one of their medical briefings. "Not over generations like normal evolution, but within our own lifetimes. The human body is more adaptable than we ever imagined when it's pushed to its limits." But the most important discovery came from watching how the colonists worked together. On Earth, people often competed against each other for resources and status. On New Phoenix, cooperation was the difference between life and death. Families shared everything they had. Specialists taught their skills to anyone willing to learn. When emergencies happened, everyone responded as a single organism. Nick Williams noticed it first when he was organizing the colony's defense against the pack hunters. "These people don't fight like soldiers," he told Jake. "They fight like a family protecting their home. They take risks for each other that trained military personnel wouldn't take. It's like they've developed a hive mind, but one based on love instead of programming." By the end of their first year on New Phoenix, the colony had not just survived, but begun to thrive. Their underground city stretched for kilometers through natural cave systems they had learned to navigate and expand. Their food production exceeded their needs for the first time since landing. Most importantly, they had learned to read the planet's moods and work with its cycles instead of against them. Jake stood in the central hub of their underground city and marveled at what they had accomplished. The Council had given them this territory expecting them to die quickly and quietly. Instead, they had built something that surpassed even their dreams of what a human colony could become. Soon, Jake knew, they would have to contact the Council again. When they did, the aliens would discover that their assumptions about human fragility had been completely wrong. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the stars grow brighter through the viewport. After 18 months of travel through the dark void between stars, they had finally reached their destination. The Kepler 442 system stretched out before them with its orange dwarf star and the blue-green planet that would become humanity's first home beyond. Earth, the horizon, carried 8,000 people in its massive hull. Families with children who had grown up during the journey, scientists eager to study alien worlds, engineers ready to build a new civilization, and soldiers prepared to defend it all. Jake had spent 3 years planning this mission, and now they were only days away from landing on the planet they would call New Phoenix. Dr. Lisa Parker floated up to the bridge using the ship's low-gravity corridors. Her dark hair was tied back and her eyes showed the excitement of a scientist about to make history. She had studied every piece of data about their destination for months and knew more about the planet than anyone else on the ship. "Captain, we're getting some unusual readings from the outer system," Lisa said as she pulled up a display screen. "There are artificial structures around the gas giant." "Big ones." Jake frowned and moved closer to look at the data. The structures were clearly not natural. They were too geometric and too organized to be asteroids or debris. Someone had built them, and that someone was not human. "Are we looking at alien technology?" Jake asked quietly. "I think so," Lisa replied. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we've ever seen. These structures are at least 50 times larger than our biggest space stations." Before Jake could respond, the ship's communication officer called out from her station, "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's not coming from Earth." The main screen flickered and then showed something that made everyone on the bridge freeze. A tall crystalline being appeared on the screen. Its body seemed to be made of living diamond that shifted and sparkled with internal light. When it spoke, its voice was like music played through broken glass. "Primitive vessel, you have entered the territory of the Galactic Convergence Council. I am Zektar of the Zephyrian Collective. State your origin and purpose." Jake stepped forward and tried to keep his voice steady. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Horizon. We are explorers from the planet Earth seeking to establish a peaceful colony in this system." The crystalline being seemed to study Jake for a long moment. Other shapes moved behind Zektar in the background. Jake could see what looked like a cloud of gas with glowing spots that might have been eyes. and something that appeared to be made of flowing metal. Earth, Zektar said slowly. Yes, we have records of your species. Carbon-based bipeds with remarkably short lifespans and primitive technology. The Council has discussed your kind before. The Council? Jake asked. 7 species govern this sector of space. We have maintained order here for 50,000 of your years. Your species was noted in our databases as a potential emerging civilization, though one of little consequence. Jake felt a flash of anger but kept it hidden. We come in peace. We only want to settle on the uninhabited planet in this system. Zektar made a sound that might have been laughter. The planet you seek is inhabited by us. However, the Council has decided to allow your settlement as an experiment. You will be given territory on the southern continent of the planet. The environmental conditions there should prove educational for your species. The transmission ended before Jake could ask any questions. The bridge was silent for several minutes as everyone tried to process what had just happened. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and they were apparently considered primitive and unimportant by their new neighbors. Lisa was the first to speak. Captain, I need to analyze the data about our assigned territory. Something about the way that alien spoke made me nervous. Over the next 2 days, as the horizon approached the planet, Lisa's fears proved correct. The southern continent was a nightmare of hostile environment. Massive deserts covered most of the land. Violent sandstorms raged across the surface for weeks at a time. The ground was unstable with frequent earthquakes and volcanic activity. Temperature swings went from freezing cold to burning hot within hours. They're trying to kill us, said Ryan Clark, the mission's colony administrator. He was a practical man who had organized the settlement of dozens of harsh environments on Earth. No one could survive long in conditions like these, but Lisa had made another discovery that changed everything. Captain, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the mineral composition of our assigned territory. The entire continent sits on top of the largest deposit of trilithium ever recorded. Jake knew enough about space travel to understand what that meant. Trilithium was the rarest element in the galaxy, and essential for faster-than-light travel. A deposit this size would be worth more than Earth's entire economy. They know it's there, Jake said quietly. The Council put us in the most dangerous place on the planet because they expect us to die quickly. Then they can claim the trilithium for themselves. Engineer Maya Rodriguez had been listening to the conversation. She was a small woman with calloused hands and the kind of practical intelligence that solved problems other people said were impossible. So what do we do, Captain? Turn around and go home? Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had given up everything to make this journey. They had families depending on them and dreams of building something better than what they left behind on Earth. The Alien Council might think humans were primitive and fragile, but they had never seen what humans could do when their backs were against the wall. We land as planned, Jake said firmly. We build our colony and we survive. The Council thinks we're weak because we're not made of crystal or metal or energy. They think our short lives make us insignificant. Let's show them what humans can do when we refuse to give up. The horizon began its descent toward the surface of New Phoenix 3 days later. As they broke through the atmosphere, Jake could see the endless desert stretching out below them. Sandstorms bigger than hurricanes raced across the landscape. Lightning flashed constantly through the dusty air, but Jake was not afraid. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed their species. They had learned to live in every environment Earth could throw at them. Now they would learn to live here too, and when they did, the Galactic Council would discover that calling humans fragile was the biggest mistake they had ever made. The Battle of Trappist System began at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, when long-range sensors detected the Devourer swarm emerging from the dark space between stars. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the combined fleet flagship, watching as the tactical display populated with contacts that defied every principle of physics and military science he had ever learned. The Devourer entities moved through space like living darkness, their forms shifting and flowing in ways that hurt to observe directly. Each creature was the size of a Council dreadnought, but they moved with organic fluidity that no mechanical construct could match. Worse, they seemed to be learning from the sensor scans directed at them, adapting their forms to deflect or absorb the energy signatures. Fleet status report, Jake called out to his tactical team, which now included representatives from all 7 Council species working alongside human officers. Colonel Lucy Grant coordinated the responses from her position at the Central Tactical Station. 2,000 Council vessels in defensive formation around TRAPPIST-7, 50 human ships integrated throughout the fleet structure. All species reporting ready for combat operations. The numbers were sobering. The combined fleet represented the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, with weapon systems capable of destroying entire planets. Against them came 100,000 devourer entities that had been consuming star systems since before the oldest Council species evolved intelligence. Captain Kelly, Young commanded the human fighter squadron, a collection of small craft that Council military doctrine considered obsolete. Her pilots were volunteers who understood that their role in the coming battle would likely be suicidal. But they also understood that sometimes impossible missions succeeded precisely because they were impossible. Devourer fleet entering weapons, range in 60 seconds, reported. Unit Prime 9 from the sensor station. Entity formations do not conform to any known tactical doctrine. They appear to be moving randomly. Jake studied the tactical display and felt a chill of recognition. They're not moving randomly. They're probing our defensive positions and learning our response patterns. Every scan we make, every formation we take, they're studying and adapting to counter. The first exchange of fire came when the lead devourer entities moved within range of the Korath heavy weapons platforms. Massive energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the dark creatures and seemed to be absorbed without effect. In response, the devourers released swarms of smaller entities that moved through space like schools of predatory fish. Korath platforms reporting weapon systems ineffective, Lucy announced as damage reports flooded the tactical display. Devourer counterattack has destroyed 40% of their heavy weapons battery. Within the first hour of combat, it became clear that conventional Council tactics were failing exactly as they had for 50,000 years. The Devourers adapted to every weapon system and countered every tactical formation with supernatural efficiency. Ship after ship vanished into the dark mass of the enemy swarm. "Admiral, we're losing the engagement," reported Zektar from his position coordinating Zephyrian computational resources. "Current casualty rates indicate complete fleet destruction within 6 hours." Jake nodded grimly. This was the moment he had been preparing for. The point where logical military doctrine would call for retreat and evacuation. But Jake was not a logical commander, and humans were not a logical species. "All units, this is Admiral Morrison. We are implementing Chaos Protocol Omega. Human vessels are taking tactical command of their assigned Council ship groups. All previous tactical doctrine is now void. We fight like humans." What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Instead of maintaining defensive formations, human commanders ordered their Council allies to break formation and attack the Devourers with random, seemingly suicidal tactics. Ships that should have provided mutual support scattered across the battlefield. Weapons were fired at targets that mathematical analysis said were impossible to hit. The Devourers, which had been adapting smoothly to logical Council tactics, suddenly found themselves facing enemies that made no sense. Human-commanded groups would charge directly at superior enemy forces, then retreat at the moment when logic demanded they continue the attack. Weapon systems were used in combinations that violated basic principles of military efficiency. Captain Kelly. Young led the first breakthrough when she realized that the Devourers' adaptation abilities had a critical weakness. They could learn to counter logical tactics, but they struggled to predict truly irrational behavior. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Captain Young. We're going in for a direct assault on the primary entity. Navigation systems offline, manual control only. Follow my lead and do exactly the opposite of what makes sense." Her squadron of 50 human fighters dove into the heart of the Devourer swarm, their small craft weaving between massive entities that should have destroyed them instantly. But instead of following attack patterns, the human pilots flew like they were dancing, their movements guided by intuition and emotion rather than tactical doctrine. The Devourers tried to adapt to the human attack patterns, but there were no patterns to adapt to. Each pilot was responding to the battle differently, making decisions based on fear, anger, hope, and determination, rather than mathematical calculation. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers found themselves unable to predict and counter their enemies' actions. Kelly's fighter penetrated the defenses of a primary Devourer entity and delivered its payload directly into the creature's core. As her ship disintegrated around her, She transmitted crucial data about Devourer internal structure to engineer Maya Rodriguez, who was working frantically aboard the flagship to develop new weapons based on real-time battle analysis. "I've got it," Maya announced over the tactical network. "The Devourers can adapt to energy weapons and kinetic impacts, but they can't adapt to structural chaos. If we can introduce random quantum fluctuations into their molecular matrix, they lose cohesion." Working with Zephyrian computational power and Luxari energy manipulation, Maya developed weapons that created controlled quantum chaos in their targets. The new weapons didn't destroy Devourer entities through brute force, but by making their adaptive biology unable to maintain molecular stability. The tide of battle began to turn, as human unpredictability created opportunities for Council technology to be effective. Sergeant Tony White led boarding parties that used jury-rigged equipment to breach Devourer hulls and plant quantum disruption charges. Each boarding mission was a suicide run, but the tactical intelligence gathered by the human Marines allowed subsequent missions to penetrate deeper into enemy defenses. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Lisa Parker, working from her research station aboard the flagship, made a discovery that changed everything. The Devourers were not just individual entities but part of a collective intelligence centered on a primary queen entity that coordinated the entire swarm. If we can disrupt the queen's control signals, the entire swarm should lose coordination, Lisa reported to Jake. But the queen is protected at the center of the swarm by thousands of individual entities. Getting to her would require a direct assault through the entire Devourer fleet. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the queen entity, a massive dark form that pulsed with energy patterns that coordinated the movements of every other Devourer. Getting to her would require sacrificing most of the remaining fleet to clear a path for a single attack ship. "This is Admiral Morrison to all fleet units. We have identified the enemy command center. I am taking the New Horizon on a direct assault run to the target. All other vessels will provide covering fire and distraction until we reach the objective." The final phase of the battle was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Human commanders coordinated Council vessels in attack patterns that made no mathematical sense, but created maximum confusion among the Devourer swarm. Ships from all 7 Council species flew alongside human craft in formations that should have been tactically impossible. As the New Horizon fought its way toward the Queen entity, Jake watched his fleet die around him. Thousands of Council vessels sacrificed themselves to clear the path forward. Human fighters flew kamikaze missions to disable Devourer defensive systems. The courage and determination displayed by every species in the combined fleet was beyond anything Jake had ever witnessed. The final approach to the Queen entity cost Jake almost everything. The New Horizon's hull was melting under Devourer weapons fire. His crew was dying at their stations as life support systems failed. But human engineering and alien technology working together had created something that the Devourers could not counter. Absolute determination combined with technological innovation. Maya Rodriguez had converted the ship's entire trilithium fuel supply into a quantum disruption weapon that would create a cascade reaction in the Queen's molecular structure. The weapon would only work if detonated directly inside the Queen's core, which meant Jake would have to ram his ship into the heart of the largest Devourer entity ever encountered. "This is Admiral Morrison to all fleet units. It has been an honor serving with you. Take care of each other and remember that today, the galaxy learned that some things are worth fighting for."